Thursday, March 21st, 2002. 13-year-old Milly Dowler walks home from school. A normal afternoon shattered by a disappearance that would terrify a nation. While her family clings to hope, the official search finds nothing. Meanwhile, beneath the surface of quiet Surrey, a hidden predator named Levi Bellfield is beginning to cast his shadow. The story behind Taken, the Milly Dowler case, is far darker than anyone realized, uncovering minute-by-minute choices, missed warnings, and a pattern of violence no one saw coming. What really happened in those crucial 8 minutes, and how did one man's troubled childhood lead to one of Britain's most shocking crimes? The answers begin here. Amanda Jane Dowler, Milly to everyone who knew her, was 13 years old, living in a quiet, semi-detached house in Walton-on-Thames with her parents, Bob and Sally, and her older sister Gemma. Her world was small and familiar. A short walk to Heathside School in Weybridge, long afternoons spent listening to music, and evenings at home, where laughter drifted easily from the kitchen. She loved to play the saxophone, filling the house with bright, brassy notes that made her parents smile. Her bedroom was a patchwork of posters, homework, and half-written diary pages, the sort of ordinary mess that comes with being 13. Most mornings, Milly left the house in her navy blazer and pleated skirt, the same as hundreds of other girls her age. She caught the train with friends, swapping stories and sweets, always home by dinner. Her parents trusted her, but not carelessly. Bob would check the time if she was late. Sally would ask about her day. Theirs was a house of small routines and gentle rules, where the biggest arguments were over whose turn it was to load the dishwasher. Gemma, 2 years older, sometimes teased Milly about her habit of singing along to every song on the radio, but they shared secrets and late-night whispers, the kind of sisterly bond that made even the dullest Sunday feel special. At school, Milly was known for her easy laugh and her kindness. She had a knack for making new girls feel welcome, for noticing when someone was left out at lunch. Teachers described her as bright and thoughtful, a steady presence in class. Outside the Dowler home, Walton-on-Thames felt safe, almost sleepy. It was a place where neighbors waved from their gardens, where children cycled to the shops in 2s and 3s. Milly's path from station to front door was well-trodden, the kind of journey parents didn't think twice about. On that ordinary Thursday in March, there was nothing to suggest the day would be any different. She packed her bag, hugged her mum, and stepped into the spring air, just another schoolgirl making her way home. At 8 minutes past 4, a friend of Gemma's stood waiting at the bus stop on Station Avenue. She watched Milly walk past, alone, blazer still buttoned, bag slung over her shoulder. That brief sighting, just a flash of navy and white in the afternoon light, would be the last time anyone confirmed seeing Milly alive. In those next few moments, the everyday world kept moving. Cars rolled by, a dog barked from a garden, and the school run thinned out along the pavement. But somewhere in that short stretch between the bus stop and the corner, Milly disappeared. Police would later piece together the timeline with painstaking care. CCTV from the Bird's Eye building at the far end of Station Avenue was checked frame by frame. The camera, rotating every few seconds, failed to capture Milly at all. She never appeared on the footage walking further down the road. That absence told its own story. Investigators realized she had vanished in a gap of barely 3 minutes, in a blind spot between the bus stop and the next camera's sweep. The distance was less than 50 yards. In broad daylight, with houses on one side and thick bushes screening the other, Milly simply ceased to exist in the world everyone knew. As news of her disappearance spread, search teams fanned out across Walton. Officers combed gardens, checked alleyways, and knocked on doors along Station Avenue, hoping someone had seen a struggling child or a lingering stranger. But there were no shouts, no calls for help, no hurried footsteps running from the scene. The street, so familiar to Milly and her family, offered nothing but silence. For detectives, the clock started ticking from 4:08 p.m. Every minute that followed widened the gulf between what was known and what could only be guessed. In that narrow window, a life was stolen, and the trail grew cold before anyone even knew to look. Levi Bellfield was born in 1968, the youngest of 5 children, on a council estate in southwest London. His earliest years unfolded in the shadow of hardship. His father, Joseph, died of leukemia when Levi was just 10, leaving his mother Jean to raise the family alone. The flat was cramped, the money tight, but Jean's attention focused sharply on her youngest son. She doted on him, excusing his outbursts and rarely holding him to account. Neighbors remembered a boy who seemed to live by different rules, shielded from consequences that fell on his siblings. School offered little refuge. At Forge Lane Junior and then Feltham Comprehensive, Bellfield was small for his age, often bullied, especially by girls. He skipped classes, wandering Hounslow Heath when he should have been in lessons. Teachers saw a boy adrift, quick to lash out, slow to trust. By 13, he'd been caught for burglary, his first conviction, a warning sign that passed with little notice. The rhythms of estate life in the 1970s and 80s offered few ways out. Violence and bravado were currency among boys looking to prove themselves. Without a father's hand to steady him, Levi learned to mask hurt with anger, to answer humiliation with force. Jean's fierce loyalty ensured he was rarely challenged at home, even as his behavior grew more erratic. In this world, the lines between protection and indulgence blurred. Bellfield's mother saw a vulnerable child. Others saw a boy growing into someone to be wary of. The wounds of those early years, loss, isolation, unchecked anger, would shape the man he became, long before anyone knew how dark that path would turn. 6 months after Milly vanished, a Polish couple searching for mushrooms in Yateley Heath Woods, Hampshire, stumbled across a human skull lying just 10 yards from a rough woodland path. It was the afternoon of September 18, 2002. They waited nearly a full day before telling anyone what they had found. By the time police arrived, the remains had been scattered. Animal activity had disturbed the bones, and the forest floor was thick with leaf litter and tangled undergrowth. The woods, a patchwork of fir, oak, and beech, were sealed off as soon as Hampshire police were notified. 40 officers began a painstaking search, sifting through every inch of ground. In the first day alone, they recovered a dozen bone fragments. Over the next week, more would be found, but there was no sign of Milly's clothing, bag, or mobile phone. The skeleton was incomplete, the skull lying separate from the rest. Forensic teams worked in boiler suits and masks, collecting crisp packets, cigarette butts, and stray hairs. Anything that might offer a clue. Identification came swiftly. Within a day, dental records confirmed the remains were Milly's, but the advanced state of decomposition meant the cause of death could not be determined. There were no obvious signs of violence left to read. Botanists studied the ground beneath the body, noting that the leaf litter matched the previous autumn, not the current year. Plants had begun to grow through the skull, a silent marker that Milly had lain there since spring. The evidence pointed to a body left soon after her disappearance, exposed to the elements and disturbed by animals, but hidden well enough that only chance had brought her to light. For her family, hope ended in a quiet clearing, miles from home. The search for answers grew more urgent as the investigation shifted from rescue to justice. In February 2003, a 19-year-old student named Marcia McDonnell stepped off a night bus in Hampton, southwest London. She had spent the evening with friends, celebrating a new film and a future that seemed wide open. As she made her way home beneath the streetlights, someone followed. Just yards from her front door, Marcia was struck from behind with a blunt object. She died in hospital 2 days later, never regaining consciousness. Police found no motive, no weapon, and no clear suspect. The attack seemed random, yet chilling in its precision. 15 months later, on a late spring evening in May 2004, Kate Sheedy finished her last day as head girl at Gumley House Convent School. She caught a bus to Isleworth and began the short walk home. A white people carrier slowed beside her, its engine idling. Sensing danger, Kate crossed the road, only to be struck deliberately by the same vehicle. The driver reversed over her body, then fled. Kate survived, battered and broken, her testimony later proving vital. She described a man with a cold, predatory stare, a detail that would echo through other cases. That summer, fear spread through the suburbs. Women changed their routes home, parents waited at bus stops, and headlines warned of a killer at large. Then, on the night of August 19, 2004, 22-year-old Milly Dowler, a French student new to London, missed her last bus in Twickenham. She was found hours later on Twickenham Green, her skull fractured by repeated blows. She died in hospital that night, never regaining consciousness. For detectives, the similarities were impossible to ignore. Young women, alone after dark, attacked without warning in residential streets. The method was always brutal, a hammer or heavy object, swift and silent, leaving little evidence behind. Within months, the Metropolitan Police brought in Detective Chief Inspector Colin Sutton. He saw what others now feared. These were not isolated tragedies. The pattern was clear. A man hunting for victims along bus routes, striking in the most ordinary corners of London. The public's sense of safety, once taken for granted, was gone. Each new attack deepened the urgency. The question was no longer if he would strike again, but when, and whether anyone could stop him before another life was lost. Detective Chief Inspector Colin Sutton arrived in the midst of mounting fear, tasked with finding a link between 3 attacks and a killer who left little behind. The investigation turned digital. Teams began a painstaking trawl through hours of CCTV footage from bus routes, high streets, and side roads across West London and Surrey. Every grainy frame was scrutinized for clues: a shadow, a license plate, a van idling at the curb. The breakthrough came not from a single image, but from a pattern. Sutton's analysts noticed a white Ford Courier van appearing near both the Sheedy and Delagrange crime scenes. Its movements matched the timeline of the attacks. Cross-referencing police databases, they identified a handful of similar vans registered in the area. One stood out: a van belonging to a man with a record for violence and a history of working as a nightclub bouncer, Levi Bellfield. But it wasn't just the van. Another vehicle, a red Daewoo Nexia, kept surfacing in the footage around crucial times. The Daewoo was registered to Emma Mills, Bellfield's partner. Sutton's team mapped the car's movements, overlaying them with the victims' last known locations. The vehicles were always close, never more than a few streets away. Investigators dug into automatic number plate recognition logs, matching the Daewoo's registration to journeys between Walton-on-Thames and Twickenham. The timelines fit. On the day Milly vanished, the red Daewoo was caught on CCTV, leaving Station Avenue within half an hour of her disappearance. As Sutton's team built their digital map, Bellfield's name kept rising to the surface. He lived near the abduction sites. He matched witness descriptions. The vehicles he controlled moved in sync with the attacks. Piece by piece, the digital hunt closed in. For the first time, the investigation had a suspect whose patterns matched the violence. Modern policing had found its lead. Detective Chief Inspector Colin Sutton stood on Station Avenue, map in hand, tracing the short walk from the bus stop to 24 Collingwood Place. The address leapt from the page, less than 100 yards from where Milly Dowler was last seen. Sutton's team had spent months poring over CCTV, phone records, and vehicle logs, but now the investigation landed right on Bellfield's doorstep. The red Daewoo, registered to Emma Mills, had been caught on camera, leaving the area just minutes after Milly vanished. Bellfield's flat sat behind a screen of bushes, invisible from the main road, perfectly placed to watch the comings and goings of schoolchildren. On November 22, 2004, officers moved in. Bellfield was arrested at dawn, the quiet of Collingwood Place shattered by the arrival of armed police. For Sutton and his team, the proximity was staggering. So close to the last sighting, so long overlooked. This was the breakthrough detectives had fought for. The suspect, the vehicle, the address, all converging within yards of that narrow window where Milly disappeared. The investigation that began with a missing schoolgirl now had a name, an arrest, and the proof that the answer had been hiding in plain sight. The first trial opened at the Old Bailey in October 2007. Levi Bellfield faced charges for the murders of Marcia McDonnell and Amélie Delagrange, the attempted murder of Kate Sheedy, and attacks on 2 others. Over weeks of testimony, a pattern unfolded. Former partners described how he charmed, then isolated and controlled them, taking their phones, cutting off friends, dictating their movements. Johanna Collings told the court about nights spent in fear, forbidden to leave a kitchen stool, too scared to move. Emma Mills recalled the day Milly vanished, Bellfield unreachable, returning home in different clothes, stripping the bed and claiming the dog had fouled it. The next morning, he moved the family out in a rush. Jurors heard how, 6 days after killing Amélie Delagrange, Bellfield broke down, admitting to a friend, "You don't know what I have done." The prosecution mapped his violence from home to street, showing a man who stalked bus routes, hunting for young women walking alone. After weeks of evidence, the jury found him guilty. The judge handed down a whole life sentence. No chance of release. In 2011, a second trial began. This time, the charge was the murder of Milly Dowler. Again, ex-partners took the stand. Their stories of coercion and fear showed the same pattern: control, isolation, violence. The jury listened as the prosecution described the red Daewoo caught on CCTV leaving Station Avenue minutes after Milly disappeared. On June 23, 2011, Bellfield was convicted once more. The court imposed another whole life sentence. For the families, the verdicts brought legal closure. For the country, the testimony left no doubt about the danger he posed and the damage he had done. In July 2011, headlines broke that reporters from the News of the World had hacked Milly Dowler's voicemail while she was still missing. The revelation stunned the country. Journalists had listened to and even deleted messages left by loved ones, giving her family false hope that she was alive. Public outrage followed swiftly. Within days, the 168-year-old News of the World printed its final edition and closed for good. The scandal exposed not just one newspaper's wrongdoing, but a culture of intrusion across the British press. Questions reached Parliament. Prime Minister David Cameron ordered a full public inquiry, what became the Leveson inquiry, into media ethics and phone hacking. Over months of testimony, the inquiry heard from victims, journalists, and police. The Dowler family, already shattered by loss, spoke of their pain at having their private grief exploited for profit. The Leveson inquiry's recommendations led to new rules for press conduct and tougher oversight, though debate about regulation continues. For the Dowlers, the impact lingers. Their daughter's case changed not only the law, but the way a nation thought about privacy, responsibility, and the true cost of a headline. On September 18, 2002, 6 months after her disappearance, Milly Dowler's remains were found in Yateley Heath Woods, confirming the worst fears of her family and the public. The investigation revealed that Levi Bellfield, whose home at 24 Collingwood Place was less than 100 yards from Milly's last known location, was responsible not only for her death, but for a series of attacks on young women between 2002 and 2004. Despite exhaustive forensic work and hundreds of witness statements, the precise details of Milly's final moments remain unknown. Bellfield was convicted in 2 separate trials in 2008 and 2011, receiving multiple whole-life sentences. The Dowler case exposed serious flaws in media conduct, leading to the closure of the News of the World and the Leveson inquiry. 2 decades on, the case stands as a stark reminder of the devastation caused by violent crime and the importance of rigorous, ethical policing and reporting. What happened during those missing minutes may never be fully answered, but the pursuit of truth and justice continues to shape how society responds to such tragedies.